Welcome to the Seatrade Maritime Podcast, where in this episode we're talking data and fouling control solutions with AkzoNobel. I'm your host for this episode, Gary Howard, and today I'm speaking with AkzoNobel Vessel Performance Manager Barry Kidd about vessel performance optimization, data, and how that relates to coatings. Our conversation covers a wide range of coatings-relevant topics, many of which are surfaced in a newly published white paper from AkzoNobel titled Optimizing Vessel Performance for Decarbonization Goals, Unveiling the Complexities of Hull Efficiency and Fouling Control with Data-Driven Decision-Making. The report is set to launch at Sea Asia 2025, a flagshipping event taking place in Singapore from March 25 to 27. If you want more details on the subjects brought up in our conversation, check the show notes for links to the white papers discussed throughout this episode, where you can explore their findings and get a better understanding of the relationship between data performance, monitoring, and vessel optimization. To kick off with, I asked Barry about his career, experience, and current role. Barry, welcome to the podcast. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little about your position at AkzoNobel and your career experience?
Absolutely. So my name's Barry Kidd. I work for AkzoNobel Marines Coating Business International Paint Limited. I'm based in the UK, in the north of England, at our Gateshead headquarters. I'm part of the business development team, and my job title is Vessel Performance Manager. And my primary focus is on fouling control coating products, performance, and vessel performance. In terms of my background and a short reflection on my work history, I'm a chemistry graduate with a PhD. I joined International Paint in January 97, so this is my 28th year. I started out working as a development chemist in the laboratory, and I stayed in that role for several years. If I jump ahead to 2011, I moved across to managing our so-called hydrodynamic project until 2018. The purpose of that project was really to delve into the detail of surfaces and how surfaces interact with water, or specifically the movement of water, which will come as no surprise is what happens when a ship moves through the water. So very much focused on the academic side of surfaces, the nature of coatings, and the things that can change in terms of the properties of coatings that might influence the resistance generated, which might in turn affect things such as powering, etc., if that's experienced on a ship's hull. So during the period of 2011 to 2018, as I say, I ran this hydrodynamic project, and we developed a huge amount of understanding through that period, working in collaboration with external institutes and academic partners, such as Newcastle University, we're very closely associated with. We managed to develop our knowledge and understanding to quite a high degree, I would say, and it enabled us to develop all the background material to support the launch of commercial tools, such as the Intertrack Vision digital application, which we launched in October 2015, which, given the fact that it's patented and patent pending in several countries, we still view this as a pioneering introduction into the market, allowing us to forecast the benefit of our fouling control coatings in terms that matter to ship owners and ship operators when I'm talking about things like powering, fuel consumption, and emissions. So we had a lot of academic development, and we developed some interesting products for our business, such as the Intertrack Vision application. We also released our knowledge into the public domain. We did publish a series of 12 technical papers throughout that period on a range of different topics. No surprise, all of them mostly associated with the nature of hydrodynamics, the nature of surfaces, fouling control products, and how these products deliver efficiency into the shipping industry. Also, progressively during that period, we started to analyse more and more vessel performance data that was being shared by our customers, the vessel operators and owners that we deal with from a day-to-day basis. As of today, it's now a routine part of our job. During that period, it was something that was progressively starting to become more important, and operators were willing to share more and more. As of today, I manage our hull performance team, and we work exclusively to support vessel operators and our sales team, and we routinely review fouling control performance and vessel performance as part of our job roles. So that's me.
Very much a relevant background then, and some pretty high stakes stuff for the shipping industry, that interaction of water and surfaces. And we're going to get into the data as well. Let's start with the new white paper, which is being published during Sea Asia 2025, looking into the role of data-driven decisions in optimizing vessel performance. I don't think it's any secret to anyone that a ship's efficiency drops by a significant margin over time if biofouling is allowed to build up, and this all costs money in the use of extra fuel. We've also seen those graphs of fuel efficiency spiking after a whole cleaning or application of a new coating in dry dock. And what were you looking to find with this white paper, and what value is there in this sort of more granular look at the role of data in hull performance optimization?
Yeah, so there's a few things to unpack there. So let's first of all start with the purpose of the white paper, and really, as you said at the start, it's about looking at making data-driven decisions and some of the things that we need to focus on to make sure we make the right decisions based on the data that's available. So the three main topics that we focus on in the white paper are, we're highlighting first and foremost, if we start with the first principle here, that the performance of the vessels that were applied with our coating product, Intersleek 1100 SR, performed really well. The coating performance was well, and it matched the operation of the ships, and it minimized the pickup of fouling on the vessel hull. So the vessels achieved optimal performance in terms of the hull coating application and the performance of the fouling control system. Secondly, we're looking at the impact of data quality and potential challenges encountered when using vessel performance data as the single source of truth, especially in terms of judging the performance of a hull application, so a fouling control coating. It's not always the case that it's easy to connect the trends in performance that we're observing from vessel performance data with the performance of the fouling control system that's applied onto the ship's hull. So there's a few things to watch out for there in terms of how you review the data and whether or not you believe it to be indicating what is a direct link with the performance of the hull coating. And last but not least, we focus on the benefits of cooperating and sharing data. We worked a lot with the vessel operator throughout the in-service period, and the intention really was to pool resources and expertise and to have an ongoing dialogue about the performance of the vessels. And again, pragmatically using the data that we had to support decision making, and also being sure of which data sets were more reliable than others in terms of what was available to hand. So in terms of pooling resource and expertise, we see this sort of level of cooperation as being quite important for the industry to maximize efficiencies and to, really look at using some of the parts in terms of the different types of expertise we have in different organizations. If we think about the second part of the question you asked at the start there about ship efficiency changing over time, and the fact that when a vessel leaves a new building or dry docking, they tend to be in their most optimal condition in terms of equipment maintenance. Everything's been maintained in the dry dock. Engines have been tuned. Hulls have been cleaned and applied with a new coating. Propellers have been cleaned. So when a vessel leaves the new building yard or a dry dock, it's in its most efficient condition. And as part of that process, our international paint technical service representatives work hard alongside the yard supervisors to make sure that the applications of our product are applied with sufficient quality. And we can also do things like taking measurements of the surface of the hull after the application of our paints to measure the hull roughness, which is a good indicator of application quality. And when you build up hundreds of these data sets, you can make sense of an individual measurement with regards to whether it's an expected or an unusual result. So when a vessel leaves dry dock, it's in its best possible condition. It's clean. There is no fouling on the ship's hull or the propeller. So it's always in its most efficient state. Vessel performance can then drop off for a number of reasons. One reason could be that the fouling control coating has been poorly matched to the vessel, the nature of the operation, and the environment in which it's operating. So I'm talking about the geographic operation of the ship, the ports and harbours that it visits, and the nature of the fouling that the vessel encounters. If the product is not matched with that environmental pressure or risk of fouling growth and settlement, then it's probably not going to perform as expected. Or in other cases, it could well be that the vessel is deviated from the expected operation. So from the expectation of the owner or the operator, the vessel was expected to operate in a certain way, and then a deviation happened. And this could be perhaps because of extended idle periods or for other reasons. So there are circumstances in which you can experience unusual fouling pickup again, which impairs that efficiency that you first had when the vessel left the dry dock, when it was smooth and clean. In either of those cases, it's important that if you do have to perform a hull clean, that it's done in the most appropriate way. First and foremost, it's got to deal with the nature of the fouling that's observed, and it's also got to do that in a way that doesn't hinder the continued performance of the coating product. So the sustainability of the performance, the robustness of the product is really important as part of any cleaning operation. And we would always encourage vessel operators to cooperate with the data and the inspection material to ensure, again, that we're talking about data-driven decision-making, and also being clear that sometimes the data presented isn't always telling you what the root cause of the issue might be. So again, using data to support decisions and taking action when it's required.
You spoke there about sort of the quality of data and working out what it is that the data is telling you, which I think is the theme that runs through this report that we're speaking about. There was a speed deviation data across the 3 ships that were studied for 5 years in the white paper, and it shows a 2-year period of improved performance for one of the ships that isn't apparent in the others. Did you come to the bottom of why this was, or have any hunches as to where this boost might have came from? I know we've explored a few reasons there that could be behind it.
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is that we didn't review this in detail, and I'll explain why. Vessel performance and an improvement in vessel performance relative to the reference period. So the reference period is a period over which we establish the speed per relationship of the vessel. And we're baselining the performance of the ship. It's very unusual to see a performance improvement that's sustained over long periods of time. Performance change can sometimes occur when vessel operations change, but this didn't happen here. There were some nuances in the operation, but nothing that I would say would constitute to a significant change in performance. One example of vessel operational change that has a bearing on performance is in recent times, vessels have been avoiding passage through the Red Sea because of obviously the geopolitical issues in that region, and have been taking a longer voyage around the African coastline. Though for vessels that have undertaken that passage, we've noticed that there's been a change in the performance of the vessel. So the trend in the performance was very regular, and then when the vessel entered the Red Sea avoidance period, there was a change in performance. So, like I say, sometimes you can associate a change in the status of the vessel in terms of its powering or speed in relation to a significant change in its operation. So that's just one example of where we've seen that in some of the data sets we cooperate with some customers. In terms of these vessels, my opinion is that what we're seeing here is attributed to several factors, including the nature and quality of the data and the data treatment. So that's my assumption. It would be nice to review this in a more academic sense to get to the bottom of it. But at the end of the day, in terms of these vessels and the performance that we observed, the vessels all complied with the operator's targets in terms of fuel oil consumption and emissions. So from the metrics the operator was looking at that we didn't have access to, they were happy with the performance of the ships.
Sure, if you're hitting those KPIs, then I understand. We report a lot that the vessels are sort of increasingly adopting these real-time data reporting from all of their onboard sensors, and this is used to automate propulsion with targets for fuel consumption or speed or whatever it might be. Are there any opportunities in the coating sector from this higher frequency data, or is it just more accurate understanding of how the hull's performing?
I think there are opportunities, and I think that it stems from the increased accuracy. In simple terms, a higher frequency data set of consistent high quality. And this is a key point. You might have a high frequency data set, but if you have signal dropout, sensor issues, which do occur, I don't think anyone is operating a perfect system out there. When you've got that consistency and quality with the high frequency, it facilitates shorter term decision making. If we look at the different ends of the scale in terms of data, if we think back to, and it still exists today, the daily average noon report, which many people will know and understand, it represents a 1 point of a day average of the vessel's operation. You could see that as the low end of data frequency and quality. That facilitates a review of certain aspects of the ship and its operation, but only over longer term periods. So with the noon data sets, you're very often looking at weeks, months, quarters, and sometimes up to a year to really review a meaningful change with a relatively as low a level of uncertainty as you can possibly measure. There's always uncertainty with the data sets. So even with high frequency data sets that enable a lower level of certainty, meaning that the performance changes are generally more reliable and also enabling timely decision making, so shorter term decision making. So when we're cooperating with customers, those high frequency data sets allow you to look quarter by quarter, sometimes month by month. It depends on the nature of the vessel, its operation. Obviously, you've got vessels that operate very differently in terms of the cargo they're carrying, the nature of the time they spend in ballast and laden conditions. So all of those things have to be taken into account as well. Regardless of the data quality and whether it's of higher frequency or higher density or not, when we're looking at a decision around whether a hull coating is performing a fouling control system, a hull inspection will always be required to verify and to confirm if the coating is performing as expected. And also, high frequency data allows us to do, as I say, more interesting things. It was one of the things that we explored in our recent white paper, which focused on a VLCC case study where a vessel was coated with one of our products, Intercept 8500 LPP. In the case of that vessel, high frequency data of consistently high quality across the 60-month period was delivered and achieved. And we could explicitly do a quarterly review with that customer, again, reviewing the performance, reviewing the inspections, supporting the customer with decision making. And it also allowed us to compare the real life performance of the ship with our Intertrack Vision forecasted performance. So the higher the quality of the data, the more interesting things that we can do as a business. One thing I just point out there is the verification of our forecast that we gave to the customer prior to application. You can't always do that with lots of the data sets that we come encounter with. And that's just simply because not all data sets are consistent in their quality. There are lots of things that happen with vessels in service that mean that majority of data sets don't qualify to that type of treatment. So that's one specific case where you can do more things with the data when the quality is sufficiently high and consistent.
Great, and we'll include a link to that VLCC study in the show notes as well. Just speaking on the difficulty of attributing, performance changes to specific operational changes on board or specific technologies, does it become more challenging as ships adopt more and more energy-saving devices?
Yeah, so it's always a challenge, especially when there's one or more installations installed during dry docking. It's very unusual for a vessel that's dry docking not to have several things going on all at once. So one of the things that's quite often sought after by vessel operators is to compare the improvement in performance that can be achieved after a dry dock relative to a period prior to dry docking. Now, when we do that study, it's very often the case that you should see a reduction in powering as a result of the refresh of the coating. Perhaps the hull was fully blasted. The vessel's returned to, as we said earlier, its most efficient condition on outdocking. So the vessel operator is expecting to see the best possible performance and a performance improvement relative to a period prior to dry docking, when it could be that the hull has some roughness experience because of damage accumulation, or there could be some fouling. So when we do that type of analysis, it's the sum of the parts that we're looking at, the cumulative effect of the entire nature of the installations that's happened during dry docking. Now, it could be that the operator has retrofitted or installed some energy-saving devices. So in all cases, when we're reviewing performance data sets, it's always the cumulative effect of everything that affects the performance of that ship. So the management of the ship, the operation of the ship, the installed devices on the ship, or energy-saving measures that have been taken by the owner and operator. In my opinion, when we're looking at this and we're looking at performance in cooperation with the customer, we're always looking at the cumulative effect. So, as I say, in terms of hull and propeller adaptations or appendages, air lubrication systems, flow ducts, PVCFs, all of these things are designed to deliver a benefit. The important thing to recognize is that if you invest all of your money in these systems and then don't invest in a clean and a smooth hull by installing a suitable fouling control system, you might not see the benefit that you expect, because a lot of these systems are relying on there being a smooth and clean hull to receive the benefit that they are designed to deliver. So it's important that investments are balanced, and it's important to recognize, again, it's the cumulative effect. One part will influence another. So if you have a rough hull because of fouling, accumulation and growth, it might mean that your benefits from your PBCF or your flow duct are not fully realized. So cumulative effect is an important thing to bear in mind. One of the things that we did, if I think back a couple of years, we worked in collaboration with Silverstream Technologies, who are a supplier of air lubrication technologies, and we released a white paper with them. And the purpose of this white paper was to explore the synergy between energy-saving solutions for the maritime industry. And again, we did a webinar and we released a white paper in October 23. And that was an exciting thing to take part in, because we were working with another energy-saving solution provider, if you like, to say to the market, hey guys, look, there's a synergy between hull coatings and hull conditioning and air lubrication technology. And just to reflect on the fact that you need to balance your investment and make the right decisions to realize the benefit from energy-saving technologies like air lubrication systems. So that's just one example of us. We'd like to collaborate more widely in the industry. And again, we understand that our product will have an effect on other energy-saving technologies delivering the full efficiency benefits that they're expected to deliver.
And we'll link to that project with Silverstream as well in the show notes. I was about to say there are certain technologies that you can quite easily measure individually because you can just turn them on and off, but that's not really the case for hull fouling. You don't have a button where it just appears and disappears, much as you might like to.
Yeah, absolutely. The air lubrication is a classic because you can turn it on and off, but you still have to take account of all of those things that contribute to the noise of the performance point of the vessel. So they have exactly the same challenge that we have in terms of reviewing the data and really drilling down to the nature of the efficiency of the air lubrication system.
This whole conversation is built on data, and I'm sure most of your products are as well. How much data does AkzoNobel have access to on the sort of broader performance of its coatings that are out there in the wild, and how is that data used and applied?
Okay, so we can broadly look at the performance of our fouling control coatings in terms of three different categories or three different aspects. We spend a lot of time reviewing the quality of applications by understanding the hull roughness that's generated after the application of our products. Our technical service representatives, during in-docking, out-docking, take measurements from vessels. And again, the purpose of these measurements is to understand the quality of the application and whether or not it is as we would expect or whether it's abnormal. And the reason why we know if it's a good application or not is we've got a database of hundreds of these measurements. And that allows us to really take account of physical hull roughness. The physical hull roughness that's generated through the application in the yard sets the foundation for performance. And as we talked about earlier, when a vessel enters service, it's when the vessel is clean and it's when the hull is, in theory, at its most efficient state in terms of the least amount of drag that's going to be generated. Now, that physical surface roughness is going to be determined by the quality of the application. The scheme plays a part, so the coating scheme plays a part, but it's highly dependent on the quality of the steel and the steel substrate as well. So things such as corrosion protection and the strategy applied in terms of anti-corrosive products are going to play a big part in this as well. So it's not just about the fouling control scheme that's attributed to that. Now, the reason why this information is important is one of the kind of primary foundations for Intertrack Vision and the models that it's based on. The physical roughness is a key parameter that we use within our modelling, and it allows us to take account of, as I said before, hull condition after a vessel's been fully blasted or if it's been part blasted. And this allows us to isolate the contribution of the surface preparation or the blasting regime from the contribution of the coating. So again, This is another unique benefit of the Intertrack Vision digital application. We can present to the customer the value of the investment in their surface preparation alongside the value of the investment in the coating product. So hull roughness measurements are an important part of our armory and one of the categories that we focus on. Another important aspect is coating performance. So we have a large number of hull inspections that have been gathered through dive inspections and also during dry docking. The number of inspections we have is well in excess of 250,000, and that provides us valuable insights into the performance of our coating products in terms of the past history of applications. It's all very well and interesting having that database. The perspective of performance really comes to life when you look at the operations of the vessels that those coatings were applied onto. And this is where another one of our digital applications, Intertrack, becomes crucially important. What Intertrack allows us to do is to look in detail at the nature of vessel operations in terms of the geographic operation of the vessel and to take account of the nature of the environment and the risk of fouling that the vessel experienced. Now, because we've got a database of inspections and we've also got a database of vessel movement, we can develop very sophisticated models in terms of the performance of our coating products. And Intertrack was developed in 2012, and it allowed us to visualize AIS datasets, so automatic identification system datasets stemming back to 2009. So we're able to align coating performance with vessel movement since 2009, and we've got well over 10,000 examples in our database. And again, this provides us with the modeling that's required to look at our coating performance and to apply it in Intertrack Vision. This is what brings the database to life. We take past experience of coating products explicitly connected with vessel operations, and we use this to project ahead in the Intertrack Vision application and to present the value of our products to customers and allow them to make the right choice for them, their performance and their budget. So coating performance is the kind of second part. This is a big significant contributor to our knowledge and how we sell our products. Last but not least is our growing vessel performance data set. And I think that we've got numbers around 350 individual vessel performance data sets. And as we talked earlier on, there is a clear trend in the industry moving towards high frequency data. If we think back to 2013, which is roughly around where our database started, most of the data in our database was based on noon data sets, and there were no high frequency data sets at that time. Whereas today, 40% of our database is based on high frequency data sets. And of the data sets that we're receiving now in the cooperations that we have with customers, 65% of those data sets are representative of high frequency data sets. So what this vessel performance data allows us to do is to review the performance of ships that have been coated with our fouling control products. Again, as I talked earlier on, we need to take care that we interpret this data properly and reflect on the fact that vessel performance is the cumulative effect of the management of the ship, the operation, and the investments. So aspects such as fouling control coating applications are a key part of that. But we need to keep our feet on the ground and say there are other things that are influencing the performance here. So we just need to be careful when we interpret that data set. There are lots of variables that are at play that influence the performance of that ship. So we carefully review the vessels and their operations in line with the vessel performance. Again, Intertrack and that database of vessel movement data is absolutely essential. It's essential that we review the operations and we align operations together. So review of the vessel operations is absolutely critical, again, to make sense of that data, especially in view of the nature of the performance of the coating product as well. And a higher quality data set facilitates a comparison with our Intertrack Vision performance modeling approach. So we get some value out of looking at those performance data sets in relation to what we forecast, and it allows us to validate individual cases, which was the case with our previous paper from the previous year on the VLCC case study. So what I would say that all amounts to is a significant and growing body of data to interpret different levels of performance of our coating products. Some of them are direct measures, some of them are indirect measures. Inspection material is always important and should always align with the vessel performance data sets. But the key thing is it helps us to diagnose issues and to support the development of new products. So whilst we use this to support sales as well, it also helps us to diagnose when we've got a gap in the market or where we think we need to develop a new product or a new service offer.
I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that number of operators using the high frequency data. I think I would have put it lower if I had to have a guess. But we're about to get onto the reasons, I think, why people are adopting that high frequency data approach, and that's regulation. There's obviously a quite clear carrot incentive for good hull coatings in the form of improved fuel efficiency, lower costs. What are the regulatory sticks that are out there or that are coming that operators and owners need to be aware of?
Yeah, so I think that there are lots of different regulations to be aware of, and perhaps this first one isn't so much a stick but a practical reality. Our coating products are composed of chemicals, and those chemicals have to be accepted and registered, and the coatings themselves have to be registered in different countries to allow the application to proceed. So from a product supply point of view, some of our products aren't always applicable in certain regions and countries simply because either the components aren't permitted or the coating product isn't locally registered. So there is local registration in terms of the supply of chemically related products that we need to be aware of. There are also IMO requirements, so that there are things that the IMO permits and there's also things that they don't permit that you have to be aware of. And a lot of this is to do with particular components of biocidal anti-fouling systems. So again, mixture of local and regional regulations to be aware of with the supply of coating products into the market. One significant thing that is important to the industry is the translocation of invasive species. This is increasingly under the spotlight, and several countries have already adopted an approach whereby in order for the vessel to be allowed to enter a port or a harbour, the vessel operator has to supply a recent hull and propeller inspection to prove that the vessel is sufficiently free of problematic fouling prior to visiting ports and harbours. And unsuitable vessels, so vessels with an excessive amount of hull fouling above the permitted level, would not be permitted to enter. And this can have quite big commercial implications because it's going to interrupt the operation of ships. You will know recently, within the last year, I think there were some cruise ships that were prevented from entering New Zealand, certain ports and harbours. And of course, this is a big issue for the vessel operator because they want to maintain the regularity of their operation, but in those cases, they didn't comply with that local regulation. So translocation of invasive species is very much under the spotlight, so much so that the IMO, International Maritime Organization, is actively looking to address the issue of biofouling. And the Marine Environment Protection Committee, the MEPC, will have its 83rd session in April this year, and they're going to consider several key developments, one of which is the guidelines on in-water cleaning. So at the moment, there are some country-level guidance, and there are some ports and harbours that will permit hull cleaning, and there are some that won't. It's anticipated that the IMO is going to provide guidance on the in-water cleaning of ships. Again, the point here is to manage the biofouling effectively, but not impose environmental harm where that cleaning is taking place. So it's anticipated that there will be guidance around that area. In terms of biofouling management plans, ship biofouling management plans until now have been mostly voluntary, whereas it's anticipated that the IMO aim to transition this to be a mandatory thing that the vessels have to comply with. So you can see that the IMO is taking action here in the same way, if you go back several years, that they took action with the ballast water treatment systems. And again, it was to avoid the translocation of invasive species through ballast water treatment at that time, or ballast water. And now they're addressing hulls and other niche areas on hulls, including propellers. So regulation in terms of biofouling management. And again, as I said earlier, there is some countries have strict regulation over hull and propeller cleaning practices. Some countries and regions will permit it. Some locations only permit cleaning when the capture of the cleaning waste is demonstrated. So there's a complex mix of some slightly different regulation here, but perhaps the IMO is going to impose some guidance here and some mandatory requirements that might change how these things are all applied. It's almost certain that there will be new standards development associated with hull cleaning and further regulation as we go ahead.
And presumably that would be quite useful in establishing a kind of level playing field and familiarity with what operators should expect as they visit ports around the world as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll stick to regulation, but this environmental in a different way, looking at ships' emissions and efficiency. Vessels out there will have a couple of CII ratings under their belt now, and year 3 is particularly important for lower rated ships. Are there any particular market segments facing a challenge from CII, and are there remedies for these vessels?
Yeah, so I think that it's well recognised that all segments of the maritime industry are going to face a challenge to implement a programme of continuous improvement. The CII, or Carbon Intensity Indicator, the bands are set up to step down year on year. And what this means is that operators need to be proactive in terms of their ship energy efficiency management plans and other efforts to decarbonise. So it's imposing a challenge on all vessels and operations. However, there are a few segments that are probably slightly more exposed than others, especially the dry bulk and the tanker fleet. The DNV estimated that 40 to 60% would lie within a D to E CII band. So it's well known that, these particular types of vessels would need to make some big changes to comply with CII targets. What we would say to any vessel owner who's faced with this tough challenge of having to implement a ship energy efficiency management plan in terms of achieving a lower CII band, such as moving from an E band to a D or down to a C, there's a number of steps they should take to review in terms of delivering the efficiency benefits. And one of the easiest investments is the application of a high-quality fouling control coating applied onto preferably a fully blasted hull to ensure that the vessel is set up with a solid foundation to achieve its best performance. Other changes to the ship will be much more difficult to impose, such as, engine power limitation and other such things, and other energy-saving devices. And the approach that we would take with customers is we would forecast the benefit of any change, any coating application in terms of the use of intertrack vision. So we would provide the customer with a forecast and provide them with what we thought would happen if they applied a certain hull coating product, or if they applied a certain treatment to the hull in terms of whether they apply a full blast or a spot blast. So intertrack vision is set up to visualize CII and to look at the context of coating choice in terms of that as a particular metric of performance that's often increasingly of interest. We can also look at things such as multi-dock applications and also extended applications up to 10 years. So whilst we're forecasting, visualizing things such as power and speed and emissions and CII bands, we can also now take into account the effect of the dry docking itself, the costs at the dry dock in terms of application and other such work that goes on. And this allows us to build up what we call a total cost of ownership. And again, we can apply it up to 10 years as a single application or as a multi-dock application. And we can also include things such as the EU ETS allowance charges. Again, the whole point is we want to try and build up that transparency around the total cost of ownership over as long a period of time that's relevant for the vessel and the operations. In view of the challenge that's faced by many of the operators, we do see a trend in operators choosing to move away from lower performing fouling control coatings to those that offer higher and more regular performance in terms of their ability to limit, inhibit, and to aid the release of fouling from ships' hulls. So, in particular, we've seen a significant rise in demand for Intercept 8500 LPP and Intersleek 1100 SR. And again, the key thing then is we can specify a coating, but achieving the best performance and the most regular consumption and emissions. We would always advise a cooperation around the data, and again, making those data-driven decisions at the right time So vessel performance data backed up by inspection material to understand coating performance at any particular point in time. I guess the reality at the end of the day is that achieving compliance for, in particular the problematic dry bulk and tanker vessels, it's going to require a combination of approaches. Hull coatings in their own right probably won't last in the long term, but may provide a short-term solution. It's highly likely that these vessels will have to apply other energy-saving measures such as engine power limitation, slow steaming, etc. Perhaps for some of the vessels, they will be short-lived and they maybe have to be scrapped because they just can't achieve the efficiency benefits from some of the easier approaches, i.e. applying hull coatings, and some of the more comprehensive approaches that require slow steaming and engine power limitations. So, we will do our part in terms of trying to help vessel operators in the best way we can.
Sure, it sounds like the detail is there for you to help advise on the ones that are going to make it and the ones that might not be able to make it with a few upgrades.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our final little topic is, perhaps it's just the sort of journalist brain that I have, but I hear a lot of facts or a lot of figures rather on fuel savings and how this technology or that has proven to do X, Y, or Z. And you're left wondering what those claims are based on and whether perhaps they've cherry-picked the data to best reflect their own products. Do you see any of this sort of thing happening in the coatings market, where there might be comparisons made between product A and product B that aren't necessarily apples to apples?
I think that every supplier of coating products will perhaps apply different approaches. One of the things that we do support is the use of the ISO 19030 standard in terms of measurement, hull and propeller performance. It does provide a means to standardize and compare the way in which you visualize vessel performance indicators, so things such as power and speed loss, etc. It provides a standard method that everyone can comply with, so you can set up apples and apples comparison of vessel performance metrics that have been applied with different coating products. So that's one means to kind of standardize.
So if a buyer is out there looking for the right question to ask to improve their confidence in the figures they're being given, then the ISO standard is a good place to start?
It is, yeah. What I will say is the ISO standard is not being comprehensively engaged by the maritime industry. Quite a lot of vessel operators deploy their own standard, but you do increasingly see operators undertaking these calculations. And again, I think it's because it provides a standard means of comparison.
In the meantime, what should buyers be looking out for when it comes to comparing products between brands?
So I think it's always important to look for evidence of proof of performance, preferably consistent with the type of vessel that's going to be operated and the nature of its operation, and extending up to the expected lifetime, so up to 60 months in service. And then the key thing is demonstrated performance tailored for customers' vessels and operations rather than generic performance. So again, this is where we would use our digital tool InterTrack Vision. So when we talk to a customer about the benefit of one product versus another product, we will use our InterTrack Vision tool to present the value of our products and services in a consistent manner. And one of the things that I generally believe to be true, not just of performance claims of fuel and control products, but kind of life in general, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. So scratching beneath the surface and looking for that evidence to back up the claims that are made is incredibly important. The other thing to consider is that it's not just about the fuel and control coating product. It's about the support that is applied in between. There are lots of things that can happen when the vessel enters service, so you have to be able to answer the what-if scenarios and support customers if things are encountered that aren't expected, so such as unusual idle periods. Perhaps the charter of the vessel completely changes the operation. So you do have to support the customer, not just the dry docking and with the sale of the product. You have to support them with in-service support and advice. And like I said before, we would encourage a data-driven approach to decision-making, and we'll continue to support vessel operators in their decarbonisation journey by providing tailored fuel control solutions and supporting the through-life management of the vessel hull. And again, the whole point of this is to try and make sure that we deliver the best performance for the vessel and to support the customer.
Well, I think that brings us to about time. We've covered a lot of ground here on fouling control solutions, the complex story that can lie behind ship performance data, and how coatings interact with other energy saving solutions. Best of luck with the launch of the white paper, which once again is linked in the show notes, along with the others we've mentioned during our chat. And that just leaves me to thank you, Barry, for joining us on the Seatrade Maritime Podcast.
Thank you very much.